Hello, everybody. This is Jonathan with the TF podcast. I'm here with Simon and Daniel. We're going to be talking about Korea in particular, where it comes to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, as well as what's been going on with COVID-19 and kind of the different ways it has been handled in the U.S. and Korea, and just kind of the similarities and ways that it hasn't been done in the U.S. I'm really excited for this conversation because both these gentlemen have a deep understanding of the markets over there and the culture, and have both worked there as well. And so give us some insight into what's happening in other parts of the world when it comes to cryptocurrency, and then when it comes to this pandemic that we're all experiencing everywhere. So with that, Simon, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first? You've been on our podcast before and been a part of our conferences. It's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, John, for having me. My name is Simon Yu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of StormX. We have two products live, Storm Play and Storm Shop, where you can either shop and earn some cryptocurrency back from shopping, or you can earn crypto rewards by playing games or trying products and services. Our goal is to try to give people earning opportunities, and we're able to do that efficiently because we're using blockchain, and the transaction fees can be lowered quite a bit.
Awesome. And Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself for everybody, please?
Yeah, I'm Daniel. I guess I was a recent grad student, but I had been building a DEX in Korea, and as well as an onboarding platform for Korea.
And you have you just got your master's in computer science, right? With focus on cryptography. Yep. Excellent. Yep. So, first thing I want to touch on overall is, well, I guess, Simon, you recently released a new product in Korea, correct?
Yeah, so we launched Storm Shop, which is a second product. It gives you cash back in the form of crypto when you shop online. Yeah, we spent Korea is part of our main launch, as we signed up 150 of the largest brands locally there for cashback and crypto.
Oh, wow. And, so my understanding is that Korea is a country where there's been a little bit more adoption of cryptocurrency than, say, the West, and at least more understanding. Is that true when it comes to how they use crypto or think of crypto?
I think, during the bubble, there was definitely a big adoption in terms of the total percentage of people being, aware of it, especially what Bitcoin was, and far more people as a percentage of the population had crypto. But yeah, as of right now, I think because the prices fell so much over the last 2 years, it sort of left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, so it hasn't been as popular. But
yeah, because I remember seeing a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a couple of months ago now, that Korea had passed some legislation when it came to cryptocurrency, and that seemed to be like a pretty positive thing. But I'm guessing that with the recent reduction in the value of cryptocurrency, that's probably not as exciting as it was.
Yeah, I mean, from a regulatory perspective, I think, acknowledging crypto as a legitimate tool was definitely a step forward. But from the interest level of retail, especially with this large drop that we faced, the last week and a half, I think the retail level is still, the interest level is still pretty low.
Yeah. And Daniel, so you said you were operating or building out a DEX when you were in Korea. Kind of tell us about how that process went. Is that project still going, or is it under a different thing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I guess initially I had one 0x grant to build what they call a hyper localized DEX for a location. So Korea was one of those locations. We went in and we were kind of trying to understand the different types of user profiles that we kind of cater towards, specifically with the type of DEX that we could build. So if you're familiar with, I guess, there's a radar relay type interface, which is kind of, I guess, more traders are focused and familiar with. And then there's more of an air swap type interface that's a lot more simplistic.
Hmm.
So I guess in the beginning, we were doing a lot of interviews and trying to do all this like HCI stuff. We realized we needed to build this kind of onboarding platform for people to at least understand what DEXs were. I guess um, there's like a very big trading population in Korea that's kind of heavily dependent on these like centralized exchanges, but kind of when it comes into like something that they have to do with their own hands, there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding or even lack of understanding. And so there was a lot of that. And so we've basically shifted our gears to um, working on onboarding people. And that's kind of like all the stuff that my crypto had been doing in the beginning with like trial and error, especially with like how interfaces are, I guess, quite different from like coming from America to Korea to Japan, let's say in terms of education.
It,
So that's what we've been building so far.
in terms of what?
I guess like you could say like onboarding education.
Oh,
So
got it.
it's kind of like how maybe perhaps like some parts of the population in Japan are more um, would desire like manual style onboarding situations versus like very minimalistic modal style kind of onboarding
Got it.
experience.
Just
And so
kind of
it's
like,
like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure Simon already knows this too, but like websites in Korea are very different looking than websites in America. I
yeah,
guess like if you remember like the GeoCities websites or like the Yahoo web homepages in like the early 2000s, it's that's kind of like a lot of Korean websites look like right now. And it's maybe just that they're more familiar with it, but that was like a big hurdle. And I mean, I lived in Korea, but I've also lived in America for the majority of my life, so it's kind of like a barrier that I was kind of trying to bridge between those technologies.
Yeah, and the one thing that's really interesting about DEXs in Korea is it's really hard to open a bank account in Korea right now because of capital controls. And so there's a big sort of shift in people trying to create DEXs to be more useful because a lot of the centralized exchanges they have limitations on what kind of bank account you can use to fund crypto. And there are only a handful of exchanges that got approved for a banking license, but you can only use one specific bank in order to deposit or withdraw money for that crypto exchange for like Upbit, for example. But it's super tough because like, like here, like if you're have an account in Bank of America, you want to open a account at Wells Fargo or KeyBank, it's super easy, right? But
hmm,
there right now, it's hard. Like if you have one account, you're sort of stuck with that.
got
Um,
it.
yeah, it's pretty strict.
And why is that? That's just like a cultural thing. How kind of just the way it is, or is it um, the regulatory thing? Like, why is that? Just curious.
I mean, I think it's largely to do with capital control.
Got it.
Just trying to make sure that the dollars don't, or the Korean won doesn't leave the country. I mean, if you've been following the markets, right, like everything's going down. Kospi is down significantly. They banned short selling last week,
Hmm.
which was pretty crazy. I think, like, at this rate, if it goes in the same way in the U.S., they'll probably do the same thing, right? And I think Korea has already been in a tough situation with Japan and China because there's been a trade war going on. Korea and Japan had really big hostility,
Hmm.
but with China and the U.S. trade war impacting it, and Korea is a little bit more on the U.S. side. It's definitely been slowing economically for a bit, and then that
Even
does.
and when you say that, is that even outside of like the current, economic situation we're under? It's something that's already been a thing, basically.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you look at Korea and Japan, I think Japan was even worse. They sort of went all in on the Olympics, and if the Olympics are going to be canceled, that's going to hurt their economy crazy because they were already at negative interest rates for a while too, right? But
Yeah.
Korea was already suffering economically before COVID hit, and I think it's very different in the U.S. because we were at the peak of the bull market right before this hit, so our impact is okay. Things are settling down, but still it's going to be really bad. But there it was sort of already bad before this hit.
Got
But
it.
it's very interesting from like an employment perspective because most people are applied like working for larger corporations rather than here it's like mostly small business owners and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's dive a little bit kind of further into that. So, as far as with what's been happening over the last couple of weeks, right? Like the Dow lost right about 30% of its value, roughly in the last week or so. What is that? I have no idea what's happening in Asian markets. What's happening in Asian markets? You said they're kind of already down. Have they been hit the same way as the U.S. and is Korea basically impacted by that? But by what's going on, I'm assuming that would be the case.
Yeah, so Kospi and Nikkei, like Korea and Japan, have been hit really hard. I think Hong Kong's been hit hard. China is opposite, just because they're saying that it's been slowing down and there's no new cases coming out of Wuhan, so things are recovering in China. So
Yeah,
it's a little bit opposite. But yeah, Korea banned short selling last week, which means that there's so many people that are trying to short the markets that are not bullish on what's going on, so they had to just completely block that, and it's still going down.
yeah,
So it's a bit of a scary thing when that happens, right?
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. In the Korea context, like you said, that they were kind of already in a bad situation anyway, but has COVID made it from bad to worse?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Let's touch on that a little bit with COVID overall. So, like Simon, I saw you tweet out the other day that you're sending your parents to Korea. You feel like they're a little bit safer over there. What's interesting is that when COVID really started out, sure, China obviously being the major center of it, but there was a pretty big outbreak in Korea, right? And it seemed to be, at least from the way it was perceived in the media, that Korea was essentially the second worst country. But since then, it seems as though things have been stabilized very, very well, right? Especially compared to what we've seen in Europe and the US. And the US is a whole nother situation because we don't necessarily know where we're at because of testing. So I'd love if you kind of just touch on that, like, either of you, based off of the contacts and connections and your understanding. And then also, Simon, like, what led you to shift to say, like, hey, like, actually now you're aware that Korea is actually in a better spot, I'm assuming, if you're willing to send your folks out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why I'm sending my parents there is because, healthcare is affordable. That means that, any person can really get free treatment. Versus here, there's still a big concern because people that are infected are afraid to go to the hospitals because they can't afford it, right? So I
Yeah.
think I started like tweeting about it like end of January. We saw all these data coming out from China, and then I knew that it wasn't going to not hit US. There's no way. But we're kind of fucked because our healthcare system is so expensive. And, once it hits us, like, what are the retail employees and the grocery workers that are still working every day without health benefits going to do when they can't show up to work because they're going to miss their paycheck? And at the same time, they can't afford a $3,200 bill just for getting testing, right? So even
Yeah.
if they're saying that testing is free and treatment is free, there's still going to be medicines and add-ons and things like that in the US. It's just big insurance, a problem that we have, and it's a problem that the rest of the world really doesn't have as much. I think the US healthcare is one of the worst in the world, and that's what I think CNBC just posted a report today saying that about 50 something percent of California is going to get infected in 8 weeks, and I don't think they're
Wow.
far off. That was like 20 million people, and that's the problem, right? And so also Korea looked bad because they were just able to test people really quickly, and Korea's
Right.
one thing Koreans are really good at is execution. Like, once they set something up, they're able to do things really quickly. And if they're testing 10,000 people a day, yes, you're going to see a lot of people come out.
Right.
Still, like, that means that because people know that they're sick, they're not going out and risking themselves, and it was free to do so. And
Right.
like, every time, even like, I have really great insurance too, but every time I go to Korea, the first thing I do is get like a full body checkup, because like I got an MRI here once with insurance. It cost me $2,300. And then when I sent my parents there, they don't have insurance. They got an MRI and a full body scan, like, CAT scan, like everything, a full package. And then it cost them $500 each without insurance, right? And
Yeah.
people, like, when you go to Korean doctors is like, like, I get prescribed, like, I get a cold, I go into the hospital, and within like 10 minutes, they'll prescribe you like medicine. And they're like, oh, wait, you don't have insurance. I'm sorry. This is going to be really expensive. And then, their definition of expensive is $15. Like
Yeah.
people with insurance get like a doctor's treatment, doctor's visit, and medicine all for like $2 to $3. And that's a normal thing. And
Yeah.
so here it's like, your health is only as good as the poorest poorest insured person in America, right? Because this thing is so contagious. Like even if you're fine, but we have to do a grocery run and go to Walmart or Costco, the guy that's serving your groceries or stocking it or delivering your Amazon package or your delivery driver, the chances that they have it, and you're probably going to get infected too. It doesn't matter how well you quarantine yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been pretty incredible to see, just how contagious it is. And, I'm sure you yourself know quite a few people who have it. Like I know just offhand about 8 people who
Wow.
they really, really suspect that they have it, but they haven't been able to test it. They're like, I've never felt this way before. I can't breathe very well. My chest hurts, my bones hurt, or all those different things. And they're like, yeah, but I haven't been around someone that's been, quote unquote infected or whatever. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's super interesting kind of to see where that's at. So, we're in Seattle. Daniel, where are you at? You're in the East Coast?
Yeah, I'm in the DC area. I'm actually
Okay.
self-quarantined past like 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to keep
Very
it safe.
Yeah, it's funny because like I think crypto Twitter like turned into coronavirus Twitter. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of like, people in crypto were pretty, I guess, well aware of it before a lot of the public was. So
Oh yeah.
I'm like very skeptical person. So I was immediately just like stocking up.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that helped.
Yeah. I've been inside of my house for about last 2.5 weeks, and kind of same thing. But I actually tweeted about this yesterday that I was like, true story. My crypto friends have known about, how dangerous coronavirus has been way before anybody else, any of my other friends. And it's true. You have people like Balaji and some of these other folks that have been like way ahead of the curve. I mean, he was talking about it, like 2-3 months ago. So, I think it's a testament to the types of individuals, I guess, that are in the space, right? Like that are working on hard problems or thinking about hard things. I kind of look at it as a compliment to crypto, folks overall.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've definitely noticed, like I've been, sort of like quote unquote shit posting a lot. And I think on Facebook, I definitely got a lot of negative feedback saying that it's just a flu and things like that early on versus Twitter. Like you guys were saying, I think, more of the crowd was sort of understanding. But the biggest thing that I noticed was a lot of people in crypto worked with China or have been to China recently because of all the, the crypto stuff and how big it was there. And they've been there and sort of seen how advanced China's technology was, and like healthcare, and like they have drones flying around and shit. And, they have a lot of like really sophisticated ways to keep people quarantined and healthily treated, right? But some of my corporate connections that I've had in the past, they haven't been to China, or they still think it's a third world country. So they're thinking that, oh, it got bad just because it was a third world country in China. And I think that sort of misconception also led to people underestimating how bad this actually was.
Totally. Yeah, I had a gentleman by the name of Matthew Graham on my show last week, and he's an American who lives in China. And kind of like you, Simon, he was saying that he was trying to get his mom to go to China. Like, hey, I want you to come to China. I think you'll be safer here. And it's just probably a weird thing for a lot of people who don't kind of understand how the situation has been to understand. On the Korea front, is Korea under control now? I know they had that one scenario. I read this article basically how it was pretty much contained, and then there's what was it? Is it patient 31 is what they're calling the person that essentially decided to go out, and then there's a big outbreak from that person. But aside from that, has it been pretty much under control to your guys' knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, from what I'm seeing too, like people are going about and like life is pretty normal there. I mean, they're testing very aggressively, and then because healthcare is so prevalent, like man, they're quarantine. They don't have to go as extreme as China to force lock people into their apartments, and it's still contained. So that's one of the reasons why my parents are in their late 60s and they're at the highest risk category. So I'm signing up to Korea because the people around them, like, there's going to be less of a chance that they're actually infected, and we'll bring it on to my parents as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what was really interesting, and, I understand some of the reasons for saying these things, but, there seemed to be a lot of information out there at the beginning that, there was no need for face mask, right? And there's people that have said both sides of that, but one thing that we have seen is, like, in places like China, or where there have been different outbreaks as such, is that they wear face masks, and it's been able to contain things, right? And so yeah, it will. I don't really know what the right answer is on that, because I'm not a medical professional, of course, and I understand that it's definitely taxing the system, but perhaps if more people were wearing face masks, even if not to get it, but not to spread it, right? That could have been perhaps a lower number.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it's surprising that people aren't wearing masks here. I know, one, it's sold out, but
Yeah.
It's just a cultural thing. Like, I wore my mask a few times going out, and people stare at me like I have it. I'm just trying to protect myself, because if someone coughs on you, and that. Yeah, I think the cultural thing is pretty interesting. But masks are sort of like normal in Asia, just because there's so much pollution that you wear it on a normal basis. But here it's sort of like you have a plague if you're wearing a mask, right?
Totally. Cool. What else should we talk about in this, for as far as from when it comes to kind of the nuances there? David, anything else that you're seeing on your side, and kind of how you're with what you're communicating and so forth?
Yeah, I guess I have two things. And I guess like the second thing is something that I was kind of curious to get Simon's opinion on, but especially with regards to the tanking crypto market. But yeah, one of the things is that I had seen maybe people were getting relaxed in Korea. And then you like see all this news and stuff about like clubs being like full and like at max capacity and people going out because like the cases are like what in like double digits and subsiding. But even like I think like 2 days ago it went back up to like 152 cases in a day. And then a lot of people have been saying, right, that there's going to be like these resurgences, and I guess when people get more lax with how sensitive they are to the situation, it's going to come back. And also, like you had seen like a lot of comparisons to, right, the Spanish flu, where it subsided during like the warmer months, and then it came back even worse in the fall. Um, but yeah, that's what I had seen. Like for example, Nantes is like that community group that Simon had mentioned, and where I was like working and living out of. It's kind of like a dormitory style kind of co-working, co-living space.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like even for them, it was, they were like hyper aware of like the situation, because like one person gets sick, everyone's sharing like the same like bathroom area or like the shower area, then it's gonna like spread just like you would see in like a college dorm or something. Something interesting is like there was like a lot of the people who live at Nantes are kind of, they have their own companies or their own projects. I think one of them actually stopped what he was doing and he created like a mask manufacturing plant.
Oh.
So he like supplies like Nantes like face masks for free, and because they were also aware of like how they needed to kind of protect their own, I guess, and but also like with like the diversity of people who actually live at Nantes, it's like they're like this like small village that can like kind of be self-functioning, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like the second thing is, Simon, like it's interesting because I was kind of thinking about like a lot of like these like crypto companies, or maybe how they manage their, I guess, their finances, or like a lot of people who might be leaving. But in your case, because you I feel like products like yours would probably shouldn't they would they would be like doing better, right? Because like there's like incentive to use it because you're basically giving people money to
Yeah,
use your
yeah. Our
product.
our
Yeah.
traffic is up through the roof right now. Just because, yeah, I think our purpose was, we're trying to give people more earning opportunities, and then sort of like, in a bull market, it's kind of fun and it's sort of a hobby to do so. But then, in a bear market, it sort of becomes like, almost necessity to really be frugal and try to get as much, dollars as you can. And yeah, so our traffic has definitely been up, which has been a good sign, I guess. But also, like, supply is being bought aggressively. I think that also helped recently as well. But yeah, it's an
What do you
interesting.
mean supply?
What do you mean?
What you said supplies being bought up aggressively?
Yeah, like we sign up like Target and Walmart, for example.
Okay. Oh, yeah,
Um,
makes sense.
so people buying groceries and,
Mm.
bulk toilet paper and, video games and computers for home office, like desks and things like that. So yeah, we're seeing a big spike. And yeah, I was talking to one of my former managers on Amazon recently, and then yeah, it's just like their traffic is up through the roof. It's not because of retail, but because AWS traffic is up through the roof, right? So
Hmm.
everyone's staying home and everyone's watching devices, and they can't keep up with the demands. Is because it's like that's the one company that probably won't fall. Yeah, like everyone focuses on the REIT things, how like all the warehouses are, completely booked, and they're over capacity, but most of their revenue comes from AWS, and that is growing right now. So it's super interesting how some businesses thrive in this.
Yeah, I actually haven't even
Um,
thought about that scenario. But that totally makes sense. Is yeah, if you have a bunch of
yeah.
people home and like for instance, we're using Zoom right now. Like I was not a Zoom customer until coronavirus, right? And so and there's different services that I'm using either more of or a new uh, you know user of because of the necessity overall, which yeah, you would need more overall cloud or whatever. It's super interesting point of view there.
There's something funny that there's like this I guess like this common term that a lot of people in Korea or young people I guess our age kind of refer to like Korea as like hell Chosun. And so like when the coronavirus was going on, right, and then Koreans, obviously had taken care of it, and then they sent us all America just kind of flipping out and like not being managed well. They called it like they called it like I don't know how they translate it in English, but like a level below hell. Because like if Korea was like hell chosen, and that's to do with kind of like the difficulty and kind of upward mobility for a lot of young people
Mm-hmm.
and their jobs. And they're like, oh, like if this is hell chosen, like what's going on in America? Is it like a level below? If like they're freaking out and then and so like a lot of people would be considering coming back to America for like school or something. But I just found that really funny because right as like Simon and I are like both Korean Americans, and then we kind of like live this kind of third culture like life where we have like family both in America and Korea.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. There's always like this kind of imbalance between like living and working in different cultures and like societies.
Yep.
But yeah, that was kind of interesting to see how that kind of flipped.
Yeah, no, actually, I'd love to kind of dig on that as I guess, our last subject there. So, I'm Latin American and my family's from Venezuela. So I know what you're talking about when you're just like kind of like you have like this multicultural and, you're like, so for me, I'm very Latin, with my family, and then I'm very not Latin, I guess, with my friends. Right. And so I know what you're saying there. And so are you saying basically that, in Korea, traditionally there's kind of like this desire to come to the US for whatever reason, but now it's more the opposite. It's like, well, we actually don't want to come to the US right now. We'd rather stay in Korea. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like look at Simon, like his parents are going to Korea. I think a lot of my family friends' parents they had come to America during the coronavirus kind of outbreak in Korea because they were afraid. And
Mm.
then, shit hit the fan here, and then they all went back. So
Interesting.
it's kind of like they're like bouncing around. Look, yeah, like same with like Singapore. I think like 90% of the infected in Singapore are like from expats who come back into Singapore from abroad, and they're the ones
Wow.
that are infected. And so it's like it's interesting. Yeah, recently one of my friends had like fled to Australia, and then she had like went back to Korea because like Australia, like literally like a day before Australia closed their had like their travel ban. So
Wow.
I've been seeing that a lot with my friends and family. So
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild. Well, with that, before we wrap up, is there anything you guys want to leave our listeners with, or kind of have people think about as they go about their day and so forth?
Yeah, well, I think this is going to be really interesting for Bitcoin, right? I mean, going back to blockchain, how this affects, what we're doing as an industry.
Yeah.
I was very, vocal about, if there was a stock market crash, so because Bitcoin is used primarily for retail investors, like it wouldn't do well. But I mentioned this on your last podcast too, which was like when we saw Bitcoin go up from like the teens to $200 is because Greece and Cyprus went bankrupt and they started limiting how much money you can take out from your account.
Uh-huh.
And I've been hearing already how like Bank of America is only allowing you to withdraw like $3,000 a day, and like people are starting to panic a little bit. And I think given where Italy and Spain and France are at, they've already been sort of struggling with economic reasons before,
Yeah.
and they're being hit hard. If there's full control where in an individual basis where people can't take out the money, I think Bitcoin's going to shoot through the roof. It's just because like, shoot, like we're going through a crisis. I
Yeah.
need medical supplies and rent and all this stuff, but then I can only take out a few $100s from my bank account in a month. Then what are
Totally.
people going to do? So
Have you ever seen the show Ozarks by chance?
no.
Oh, it's not going to be as funny then, but it's an interesting show, but they do nefarious things. But he stores cash in his wall, like he takes the panels off the wall, and it's just like stacks of cash in there. So I was wondering if that's what you're going to be doing next. But I think Bitcoin becomes a little bit easier in that context. Put it on a drive. Totally. Well, cool, guys. Well, it's been a fun conversation. I mean, I think it's great to give people just other perspective as well that, we don't get to see. So I appreciate you both kind of talking about, that connection between Korea and here, and then, just kind of what we've been seeing. And so, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks, John, for having us.
Yeah, no problem. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. And Simon and Daniel, what are good ways that people can either, follow you or stay in contact with you?
You can follow me on Twitter, Simon Yu, or LinkedIn, Simon Yu, and StormX. You should be able to find me pretty easily.
Perfect.
Yeah, I guess my Twitter is danhuang88.
All right. I'll have to put that in the show notes. All right. Well, thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.
All right. Peace.
Thanks, Sean.